Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing the mid-year book freakout tag. So this is a tag that is a review of the first half of the year's reading, talking about some highs and lows. In the first half of the year, I read 50 books, which 50 was actually my Goodreads reading goal for the entire year, which when I set that goal, I was expecting to reach it around mid-year based on my reading from previous years, but it was like very exact that the last book that I read in June was the 50th book of the year. So I've already reached that goal and I'm expecting to, of course, continue on. I'm not sure if I'm going to read another 50 books in the second half of the year. I don't know if I'm going to reach 100 this year, but that's okay. You know, the goal has been met. Whatever happens after this is bonus. Anyway, let's just get into the questions, and I'm going to link below the channels of the original videos. I'm not sure if the original videos are still up. If they are, I'll link them. If not, I will just link the channels of the original creators. So question 1 is best book you've read so far in 2020. So the best book that I read in the first half of 2020 for me was definitely Mem by Bethany C. Morrow. This is set in an alternate history 1920s Montreal, and it is about that they've created this technology that can remove memories from people's minds. And it's really kind of exploring how our memories are a part of us and how they form us and what happens to us and our identities and sense of self and just who we are when we try to remove pieces of ourselves and deny like things from our experiences. So I absolutely loved this. Obviously, I have gotten really interested in books that kind of explore memory as a theme, and this is one of my favorite ones that I've read about that. I have a whole review that I will link below if you want to hear more about like what the actual plot is about. And also other just reasons that I loved this. But I also, one of the things I also really love about this is that I feel like it's one I can really recommend to people. I feel like there are a lot of books that I really love that in my day-to-day life, like outside of Booktube, I don't necessarily recommend to people because they're very like taste specific or it's like a large commitment or like whatever. But this is one that I have recommended to a bunch of different people, and I just feel really good about recommending to people because I think it is really well done. It's really well written. You can like the characters even though the book is so short, and that is one of the things that I like about this is that this is under 200 pages, so it's not like too much of a commitment for people. It's just so easy to get into, and I feel like people can enjoy it and get a lot out of it. So I loved reading it, but I also love it that it's a recommendation that I feel like I can give out and I can feel really good about, so I just like that about it too. Question 2 is best sequel you've read so far in 2020. In the first half of 2020, I haven't read a lot of sequels, but I have a couple to pick from, and one of the best ones that I read was Storm of Locusts by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the second book in the Sixth World series. And the first one is Trail of Lightning. This is like a Navajo-inspired post-apocalyptic sort of urban fantasy. It's not actually set in an urban setting, but it has a lot of the same like tropes and plot beats as urban fantasy, so it very much feels like urban fantasy. But I think even if you're not someone who usually reads urban fantasy, you can like this series. Anyways, I read Storm of Locusts this year, and I actually listened to it as an audiobook, which I really loved. And this is one that I just had a really fun time reading. In this series, we're following Maggie, who is a monster hunter. One of the things that I especially liked about this was that I felt like the pacing was really good. And the only exception to that was maybe right at the end. I felt like the ending was like a little too fast, but overall, I thought the pacing in this was really good, and it just kept me wanting more and kept me wanting to read, so this one was really fun. Question 3 is new release you haven't read yet but want to. So the first one is Forest of Souls by Lori M. Lee, and this is a YA fantasy that has like an evil forest that I guess like traps souls or something. I don't really remember what the plot of this is, but I remember thinking it sounded interesting, and also there's an evil forest, so I'm pretty excited about that. And then the other one that I'm excited for is Or What You Will by Jo Walton. So Jo Walton is an author that I've never read before, but I have heard good things about her books. And this is another YA, but this is one that is a book about books. And I think that there is a character from a book that like comes to life or something. But love books about books, so excited for this. Then question 4 is most anticipated release for the second half of the year. So I've made multiple videos about my most anticipated releases for the year. I have a couple that are kind of spanning the entire year, and then I more recently made one that was like just for the second half of the year. So I'll link those below if you want to know more about like a lot of the books that I'm excited about. But there are 4 books that are kind of top priority for me, although a lot of the books that I'm most excited for are coming out in like September and October, so those are going to be like very exciting months and ones that I'm gonna have a really hard time deciding what to read first. But the 4 that I'm like most excited about are A Dance with Fate by Juliet Marillier, which is the second book in the Warrior Bards trilogy. The Forgotten Kingdom by Signe Pike, which is the second book in the Lost Queen trilogy. Nightshine by Tessa Gratton, and The Betrayals by Bridget Collins. And so those are the 4 that I'm like most excited for in the second half of the year, mostly because they are either continuations of series that I'm already invested in or ones that are from authors that I really love. Question 5 is your biggest disappointment. So for the first half of the year, my biggest disappointment was probably The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern, which I just realized somehow got scratched, which is sad. But this is not necessarily my least favorite book that I read in the first half of the year, but this is probably the most disappointing because I was really hoping to love it. I had never read anything by Erin Morgenstern before this, and so I had always heard about how beautiful her writing is, and this is a book about books, and so I just thought I was gonna love it, and I really just didn't. Like, there wasn't anything that really worked for me, and I just felt like I was underwhelmed by every aspect of this book. This is another one that I have a full review for this about why it didn't work for me, so I'll link that below if you want to know more about why I didn't like this. Question 6 is biggest surprise. And I didn't have any like wildly surprising books in the first half of the year, but I'm gonna just talk about Come Tumbling Down by Shauna Maguire. This is the 5th book, I think. I don't know. It's like the 5th or 6th in the Wayward Children series, which is a series of novellas about kids who go through like portal doors to other magical worlds, and now they're kind of trying to reacclimate to living in this world. In this one, we are back at the moors with Jack and Jill, but also with some of the other characters. So this is a location through one of the portal worlds with some characters that we have been with before. And there are 2 reasons that this book surprised me. One is because, as I said, we've been in the moors before with Jack and Jill in Down Among the Sticks and Bones, and that was one of my least favorite books in this series so far. And so I was expecting to not really like this one just because I felt like I didn't like that setting and I wasn't as interested in those characters, but I ended up really enjoying this and really liking the setting. And I think that one of the reasons I liked it was because we had been, like, I was already a little familiar with the world, and because we had already visited this world, she was able to do a little more world building and give us a little more of the backstory and information about this world, which I really liked. The other thing that surprised me about this was that this is probably the first book in this series that has felt like a complete story to me. I really enjoy this series, but every single book, I feel like it leaves me just a little bit wanting. Like, there's a little something that it just doesn't feel like a complete story. I just wish it had been like a tiny bit longer. We'd had a little bit more information. Just something isn't quite complete to me. But this one felt like a complete story, and I was completely satisfied with it, and I really enjoyed it. So this ended up being one of my favorite books in that series, and so I was surprised by that because I was expecting this to kind of just be okay, and I was just sort of reading it to make sure I was up to speed for the next book that I was expecting to like more. Question 7 is favorite new author, can be debut or new to you. So I kind of have two answers to this because I don't usually consider an author like a new favorite until I have read multiple books by them and enjoyed multiple books. So I don't have an author that I discovered this year that I have read enough books by to like call a new favorite author. But I have one author that I discovered last year, but then I read more books this year and has like solidified as a favorite, and one that I think has potential to become a favorite once I read more. Okay, so I feel like these aren't going to be a big surprise, but the author that I discovered last year and then I've read more books this year is of course Tessa Gratton. I discovered at the end of last year when I read The Queens of Innisleer, which is now one of my favorite books, and then throughout 2020 I've been reading more of her books and I've read 4 of them by now, and I've enjoyed all of them, some of course more than others, but I've been enjoying her books enough that I feel like I can confidently say she is a favorite author now, and I am excited to read anything that she comes out with. I really like her writing. I like the kind of characters and relationships that she writes. I think her concepts are interesting. I love that a lot of her books incorporate nature magic. You know, I really love her books, and she has been solidified as a favorite author this year, even though I first discovered her books last year. And the other author, of course, is Bethany C. Morrow, who wrote Mem, which I've only read Mem by her, and I am excited to read more books. So I don't know if I would say that she's a favorite author just yet, but I definitely think that I have enjoyed this book enough that I feel like she has potential to be a favorite author, and I feel pretty confident like reading other books by her. So this is one that I am planning to read more by Bethany C. Morrow as she comes out with more. She just had a new book come out called A Song Below Water, which I'm hoping to read very soon, and hopefully that will help solidify her as a favorite author. Question 8 is newest fictional crush, but I don't really get fictional crushes, so we're just moving on from that one. And question 9 is newest favorite character. And this is one that I'm very excited about because I feel like in past years when I've done this tag, I didn't always have like a new favorite character to talk about, but this year I definitely do, which is Connolly from Lady Hotspur. So Lady Hotspur is by Tessa Gratton. So this is set in the same world as her book, The Queens of Innisleer. It's set like 100 years after that book, and this one is a retelling of Shakespeare's Henry IV. I don't know if it's part 1 or part 2. And Connolly is he's kind of a side character. Like, he does get a perspective, but he's like more of a side perspective character. But I just love him so much. Like, I think in my review of this, every time I've talked about this, I mention that while I was reading it, there was one time when I was commuting to work, when I was still going into work before COVID, where I spent an entire hour in my commute just listening to dramatic music and thinking about my favorite character and how sad he makes me. That's Connolly from like Lady Hotspur. I love him so much. Like, I don't know, he's just like, he's so sweet. He's just too good and too pure for this world. He just wants to like live in the forest and talk to the trees and the animals of the forest and like be a witch and just live out there and do his witchy thing and like live with the person that he loves, and that's it. But he can't do that because of all of the like ridiculous political stuff going on, and so he just goes like, okay, no one cares about me and what I want, so I may as well just let them ruin my life for their own political gain. Like, he's just too good and too pure for all of this, and he's such a sad boy, but he's so sweet and I love him so much, and he deserves so much better. Like, oh my god, I just love him so much. I just want to give him a hug and like protect him. Question 10 is a book that made you cry. And I don't cry a lot at books. I can't think of one in the first half of the year that made me cry, but the book that made me the most emotional was definitely Lady Hotspur. In addition to Connolly, there are a lot of other characters in this that I love. There are a lot of political things going on that just kind of put people in terrible situations and are keeping people apart who want to be together. And like, there are just so many characters in this that I loved. I really enjoyed this book. I feel like thinking back on the review for this, oh yeah, I have a full review for this that I'll link below if you want to hear me talk about it. I feel like I made it sound like I didn't love this book, but I really did. I loved this book and I loved the characters in it, but especially Connolly, and he just made my heart hurt and made me so sad. Question 11 is a book that made you happy. So a book that made me happy that I just recently read was Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is a contemporary romance, which is not my usual genre, but I read this in June, and in June I just wanted things that were like happy and easy and fun to read, and this was definitely that. It's probably my favorite like romance book, especially like contemporary romance, that I've ever read. Granted, I have not read a lot of them, but I loved it so much. I loved both of the characters, I loved their relationship to each other, and they're just trying so hard, and I just loved both of them and their relationship and everything about it, and it was so cute. It was like just heart-burstingly cute, and I loved it. Question 12 is the most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. A cover that I really liked that I got in the first half of the year was Shorefall by Robert Jackson Bennett. I really like the style that the covers of these books are in. I feel like I can't think of any other books that have a cover design quite like these, and I just really enjoy them. I do think I like the cover of the first book a little bit better than this one, just because it's warm colors and I prefer warm colors, but I still really love this. I love how saturated the colors are and the contrast of it. I just really love this cover. And the final question, question 13, is what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So of course, I have tons of books that I want to read by the end of the year. But one of the things I specifically want to do is I want to read through more of the books that were on my shelf at the beginning of the year. So one of the things that I track in my reading journal, and I've just started doing it on Goodreads also, are the books that I started the year with. And then I have another list that are the books that I've been buying during 2020, just so I can keep track of like what are the books that are kind of rolling over from the previous year versus the ones that are coming in fresh this year. And I have been doing actually a pretty good job of reducing the books from last year, the ones that rolled over. And I want to get it down even further because I would love to go into next year with at least as few books as possible that are from like multiple years ago. I would love it if all of my TBR books were books that I had bought in 2020, so that they weren't books that have just been like sitting on my shelves for a year or more. But I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get there quite, but I would like to at least reduce it significantly. So right now, I think I have about 36 books that were on my shelf at the beginning of the year that rolled over from the previous year. I would love to get maybe 26 of those off of my shelf by the end of the year, so that I only had maybe 10 that would be like older books that were older than 2020 going into the new year. If I could do more than that, that would be amazing, but I want to give myself at least a little wiggle room because there are a few books that I'm pretty positive I don't want to get to this year, but I don't want to get rid of them. Anyways, that's just like a goal that I want to work on, that I just want to try and get rid of some of the books that have been sitting on my shelf for way too long and keep rolling over and rolling over and rolling over into the next year and the next year. Whether that is by reading them, DNFing them, or unhauling them. I just want to kind of clear it out that way so that I have fresh books that I'm like excited about. But I know that that's not a specific book, so one specific book that I want to read by the end of the year is Fool's Fate by Robin Hobb. This is the final book in the Tawny Man trilogy, and this trilogy I've been trying to finish for so long. I finally just read The Golden Fool, which is the second book, which I have been trying to read. I've been trying to like get myself to read it for like a year, and I finally finished it, and I really want to finish this last book by the end of the year so that I can complete this trilogy and move on to the next series, because I've taken way too long to get through this series. Alright, so that is all for the mid-year book freakout tag. Thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!